So I'm Mariana Cabugueira, Portuguese. I'm from Lisbon. I did my master in architecture in Lisbon, really long academic years. I always say this on my talks, it's not like the recipe of success. I don't want people to think that you should have like a super long academic path to become successful in any way, but I had to study for almost 8-9 years. I did 2 masters. The first master was in Lisbon. It was kind of a long one because I was still searching what I wanted to be in architecture, and in reality, I wanted to do what we do here, like around us, design in architecture. So I was in a very conventional school, as most of architectural schools are, very modernist, very Le Corbusier kind of thing. I know you guys also do it a lot in your university. So I had to finish my master and to look for a second master. And I was already kind of like 26, so I was old. And I still decided to come to London. This is where everything started. It was literally here where we are, where I took you. It was really a big breakthrough in Mariana's life. It was in this messy place around us. So I came here to London when I was 26. I was looking for something else in architecture, something that was design-driven, something that had to do with technology. I think our generation could see it very obvious that technology would take shape in our profession. And we could also understand clearly that the knowledge that was passing in our conventional schools was very far from our digital reality. So when I got here into London and to DAI, I saw all of this, and it was very clear to me, like a stroke, that yeah, I'm home, like I belong here. People around the world from everywhere, from the world gathered here, almost similar age, and they all had the same ambition in architecture, which was design technology. And then they all had their masters as well, so they were all extending the same academic years, so everyone's making that effort. And that was basically what started everything, was to join DRL, Design Research Laboratory at DAA. So I moved from Lisbon to London, and then I've been living here for 8 years. I wanted to be an architect since I was like 6, 7. That was actually when I did my first plan, 2D plan, which was horrible, but I wish I could see it now. But I wanted to be a painter in reality. I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be not a construction worker, but I wanted to paint walls. Because in reality, when I was really young, I was painting walls, like drawing on walls. And then I told this to my parents. I kept like this fixated idea that I wanted to paint walls, and then they told me, they lied to me. They actually told me that architects paint walls. And they said, you could be an architect. They can also paint walls, or they allow them to paint walls, which obviously they don't. And then I said, okay, then I'll be an architect and a painter. Then I kept this fixated idea until I was, I don't know, like 17. I thought I was going to be a painter and an architect. And then I had like my first big heartbreak when I found out that architects were doing everything digitally, funny enough, because now I only do, I'm like the queen of digital stuff. But I was like really heartbroken. And I told my parents that I was going to stay as a conventional architect doing like hand drawings and paintings, even if everyone was doing AutoCAD. And then I joined the university. It was really hard to join. Like the public school had a very, very high mark to enter. And then I got in, and then I found out what architecture really was. So I did not have any icon, or I never really looked up at anyone on anything, I think, like even on a professional level, or actor or singer. I never had like, like a role model or anything. Actually, the first poster I ever had on the wall, and yeah, I need to be honest about it, it was Zara, but I was like 24, and I was in Milan, and I saw her for the first time, and then she was on the cover of a magazine called Abitare in Milan, and I cropped it and then I put it on the wall. Little did I know that I would be working for her office. I think that was the closest I've had like for a role model in our profession. It was clearly a woman, and it was clearly someone doing fluid architecture, or like expressing something else in architecture that is not just a place for living. It's a good question because, you know, when we were talking, I know that you travel and especially for interviews, but I also had my time when I was traveling solo, and it was mostly for architecture. And I was looking for something that I read on a book, a very important book for architecture called Genius Loci, from Norbert Schulz. And he believes that the genius loci, which means place, is like the soul of the cities. And he wrote specifically about Prague and Rome. And then I don't remember which one. Okay, but Rome was definitely his genius loci, like the soul of the city. So I decided to start looking for this romantic notion of the genius of the places, and went to Rome, especially to Rome, stayed like for a whole week looking for the genius, did not find it. Because it's super touristic, so I was kind of really disappointed. But it began like a series of traveling to find that special side of the cities, the soul of the cities, which we do find very often in Mediterranean cities. So I think it is very obvious, and I can never discard Lisbon to be the city that I know like the palm of my hands. And has like a different soul for me. And I've read about the city, like, I don't know, since its very beginning till now. Like, I really know everything about it, like urbanistically and historically, and about events and about the people, about society. So Lisbon is definitely my hometown and also my city, although I do not live there, but yeah. It's funny, you're comparing both. Which one did you relate the most? Just out of curiosity. Porto. I knew it. Porto is like, you know, melancholia. It's like the city of melancholia. It's melancholic. It's slightly sadder. It was also poorer for, it was the capital a long time ago, and then it became like one of the poorest side, almost like the second child. And you can tell that there is like that second child frustration, which a lot of people really like it because of that. Like, it is almost like a hurt soul. But it's funny that you prefer. Says a lot about you. Are you a second child? I'm a second child, that's why. Anyway, Lisbon, a little bit about Lisbon. It's exactly in that direction. Like, its geographical conditions is one of the most important characteristics of its identity. It's literally the geographic conditions. It's 7 hills, the center of the city. It's 7 hills. They are like sort of not too high, but also not very low. They are high enough for you to see the other hills when you're at the top of them. They're all facing a river, a very important river, and the other side of the river is very clear as well, kind of like in this kind of fog always scenario. So it's very romantic in that sense, that you have 7 hills, you go up to the hill, then you see the other hills, then you have the river, and you can actually look at the horizon, which is something that in London you don't get. But in Lisbon you have most of the times you have the presence of the horizon, which gives it a little of this nostalgic, very romantic way to live the city. With a slight hint of sadness as well, funny enough, because Lisbon does not have a super happy history. I mean, obviously there are happy events, but it went like through really, first it's not a super expensive city, or it's not a very rich city, and our history is very humble, and everything about our past reigns are very humble reigns, and you can tell it. So it's just a humble city that, to be honest, is a happy place to live. It's not a super ambitious place to live, but you be happy and people are polite and happy. So probably when you get older, it's definitely one of the places to live in, for real. First, exactly like you said, the public school is I mean, back then it was the main school. It was hard to join, it was hard to get in, and it was like a big establishment. On the first year, they do allow you some expression, and it's a little bit more plastic. And then on the second year, you're like that's when like you start hearing about Le Corbusier. This is when like Team 8, Team 10 starts, and you stay at modernism. I did have one teacher that taught us about Peter Eisman and Gary, a hint of Zaha, but that was almost like, you know, taboo. Like if anyone heard her, they'll probably like drag her out like, because Zaha was mentioned. But it was like, and it's funny because I did not know that they were so important when she was teaching them, but I remember clearly her presentation, and for the first time in these whole 5 years at the university, to have like a moment of like a core memory. Like I was looking at Peter Eisman stuff and I was like, core memory, like really recording. I could really tell that there was a lot there that was not like being explained enough. And I mean, Peter Eisman, Frank Gehry, everything we do, and then Greg Lynn comes from, everything here comes from them. And she was the only person in 5 years to mention Peter Eisman, Frank Gehry. It's insane. It shouldn't even be allowed in universities to talk about Peter Eisman on your third year for like a presentation. It's ridiculous. But it's what you said. Teachers do teach according to their culture, and yeah, for their cities, for the countries. And I always wondered why is this, because it's what they know about, which is it's most likely one of the biggest reasons. This is what they know. They probably do not know about Greg Lynn. They probably don't know about form finding or Peter Eisman enough. Or are they just in disbelief of, you know, everything that happened in architecture in the 90s and all the thousands, and then and now the 2020s? Or are they in disbelief? They don't believe in it? Or is it because they don't know how to teach it? Or are they really giving students the tools to operate in the most common scenario, which will be their country? And it will be clients for their country, and the workflow will be most likely done in their own country. So are they just giving us the tools to the average career path in Portugal in that case? So is this a strategy? And I thought about it many times, and then especially when I was here at the DRL, because I did feel a huge difference between me and them, everyone around me. I did not have the knowledge in digital tools, especially. Like I only knew AutoCAD, and everyone here were like coding and 3D modeling, and I was the worst by far. Like at some point I thought that we were 30 students, and then they allowed 31, and I tell you, like, and I never told this to anyone, I thought I was the number 31. I thought they were like, let's make an exception. You know, like this girl, she knows like 2D plans, but let's make an exception and allow her. Because I did not have at all the competencies for joining DRL. And that was because I was taught a conventional way to practice architecture in Portugal for those 5 years. So then you start wondering, like, not all of us are going to take the common path. So if you're going to teach the average, you're going to stay average. And you're going to expect average forever in architecture. Especially now, I even think that average is not even that. Average now, it is working for companies outside your country and for clients who are building in another country and are expecting something else and probably something more ambitious. So whatever you're teaching now that only fits their city or their country is not enough, is not even average. And that was one of my biggest concerns when it comes to academia. I actually thought I was going to create a school when I was doing the university. I was like writing down everything that was wrong, but it's like that kind of things, like you choose your battles and it's not my battle anymore. Like, I don't care, it's just too long, it's impossible. Also, like how many people do really want to have a practice in architecture and teach? It's really hard. to be doing it. So most of the times your teachers don't even have a practice. So they do teach a bit of what they know. And yeah, it is an issue. I don't know how it's going to be solved. Probably what we are doing online, and I mean, I apologize universities for that, but what we are teaching online is almost more relevant than what they are learning in universities and is being taught by people on the field, from Foster's, from Zaha, from Hedderwick, from, you know, they are just teaching softwares, but also different approaches to architecture. And you can get like your traditional academic degree in your university, but make sure that you learn how to practice architecture from digital courses. It's horrible, but that's the reality. I was finishing my master's degree in Lisbon, and I did like 6 years. And then I extended my master for a bit more, and then I saw my friends and colleagues starting work in Lisbon as interns, and I could tell like that they were not happy. That was like a total chop in their creativity, and I even came across an email that I wrote to my tutor saying like I cannot really finish university and start working here. Like I will chop some of my most important years of creativity, which is when you're late 20s. So I was like, I need to go somewhere. I need to go somewhere. Like there's no way I'm gonna do this the traditional way. And I don't even care if I'm not gonna do internship. I don't even care if I cannot sign projects in the future. Like there's no way. Like, so I started looking for other schools. I saw SciArc, I mean, obviously. And then I saw the AA for the first time. So no one in Portugal really knows about AA. Although I do know that it's kind of famous. It's not something that it's, I mean, we were not even being talked about Peter Eisman, imagine AA. So, or Cedric Price. So I saw the AA. I saw that Cedric Price had been a student here, Remkula, Zaha, kind of Frampton, which is one of my favorite writers in architecture. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm just gonna go there on their open day, which is a day that I recommend everyone to take if you're lost in architecture, which is a day where the schools are open for tours and they show you around, they show you like post-grad courses, they show you PhD courses. And I was like, I don't know what happens after, but I'm gonna go to this open day. And it was also on my birthday, so it was like a present for myself. I was like, I'm gonna buy myself a trip to London. And when I got here, there was like the tour. I remember clearly who was doing the tour, funny enough. And we were like all going like behind this guy and he was showing around, and I saw a lot of people going in the same direction to an auditorium, like flocking. I was like, what the hell is happening? And everyone, it was like a buzz, a huge buzz. And he was not even talking about it. He was just going. And then I decided, I'm gonna ditch this tour. I'm gonna follow these people. So I ditched the guy, and he was such a nice guy. And then I was like, man, no, this is so boring. I wanna see where these people are going. I followed them, and then we entered into this huge auditorium. I mean, now that I look at it, it's kind of small, but for me it was like huge, full of these models that you see here. But I mean, obviously they were the final models, so like huge models. And it was a huge presentation. It was completely full in the darkness, super full. And there were like students presenting with boards from the beginning of one wall to the last, with like craziest digital like renders, digital like design in architecture. And like, mind you, I was coming from like a conventional school. So I was like, whoa. I was like, what the hell? And they were presenting, and then one of them said like, Patrick, and now I know who this person is, Patrick, and Patrick Schumacher just walks in front of me. I read about like parametricism on my own, like I landed on parametricism when I was doing my thesis. So I saw like the writer of parametricism passing in front of me. I was like, where the hell am I? And then they started presenting, and that's when like everything hit. Like they were doing the final presentations of the DRL. I mean, this is DRL studio. So they were working here for a year and a half just to present their final projects there. And I landed exactly on the final presentation day. It was like a coincidence. And then I heard for the first time that there is not just design in architecture, but design research that has been going on since the 80s, since CAD, computer aided design. They have been doing research in architecture to improve design and to bring technology to design. And that was like literally the reason I came the day after, and it was like a whole day. I sat down on a chair. And then by the end of it, the director of the studio, called Theo, he stood up in his very Theo voice, which is very deep voice, and said like, "Hi guys, some of you will be joining next year." And I, you know, like I heard him and I really felt I'm gonna be here next year, I'm sure. And then, funny enough, a year and a half I would be presenting there, and then I go to the finals every year for the past 8 years. It's like a home for me. So it was not London for London. It was the DRL. You know, I don't really fetishize people. I don't see people as like flawless. And I always have something to criticize about their decision, or I just don't idolize anyone. And I've never. So in reality, not just the mentor side, but more what keeps me going, it is always the Mariana from the past. The one that had like full energy, that was like fighting, and that was putting all the time, and was building the future for me now. And I know I have a very big fear of slowing down with age, in every aspect, because we do. So in a way, I always make sure that I am making justice to that Mariana, you know what I mean? But in everything, not just architecture, also physically. For example, that's very important for me, my motor capacities. So I do work out a lot, and the fact that I was working out a lot more when I was younger pushes me for like, I'm not gonna slow down on this. I'm not gonna get any weaker than what I was. So in a way, it really is not mentoring, but it is probably one of the biggest sources of energy and motivation. It was like, make justice to who you were and what you dreamed of. No, Zaha was my first job, actually. Yeah, I joined as an assistant. When I got here on my first day, I was like on my welcome drinks, and there was a guy who is my friend now, but he was older, and he was talking with the youngsters, us, and he said something like, so, like super chill. Are you guys joining Zaha after what? And I was like, what? First, like, this person just said Zaha, but not like Zaha Hadid, it's like Zaha, you know, like that place. And I was like eardropping, and I was like, what the hell? And I kept like talking with someone else, and then I started like searching a bit more into it, and I found out that a lot of people were joining Zaha after DRL, and I don't know, like, what you thought. I mean, now you know all these big guys and big architects, but for me, it was like a cathedral of architecture. It was like, you don't say Zaha, you say Zaha Hadid's architect, you know? It was unthinkable for me to join Zaha. Unthinkable. I mean, obviously it was, I really dreamt of joining Zaha, but it was completely out of my league, totally out of my league, I felt. So when I heard him, I was like, you know what, like, this, I'm gonna aim for this. This is like there. Obviously, I was very focused during the DRL. You don't have space to think about anything else. But when I finished, I was like, plan A and plan B. It's Zaha. So I went after Patrick. I had like the courage to go after Patrick, and when he was like going downstairs, I was like, Patrick. And he had to send his portfolio, to send my portfolio. So I sent my portfolio. I had to wait for a couple of months, and it was like the hardest months of my life. A lot of stuff happened as well. So I was in London, kind of lost, doing my portfolio, and it was like really a tough time. Not just because of that, but because of many things that happened in London as well. And then And then one day I got like an email with Patrick and his PRs asking for an interview with Paulo Flores. And I interviewed with Melody and Nils. And I felt like I was, sometimes you do feel that this is the obvious next step, that it's so natural. It's almost like you've been there before. And I felt like it was a normal conversation between us as someone who already belonged there. So, and then they hired me and I stayed for 5 years and something. And when I joined the cluster, when I joined Zaha, I joined the Zaha cluster, which is, there's cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, then Zaha cluster, which was a cluster that was made by Zaha. I mean, it's called Zaha cluster, but she created a cluster. It was the last cluster created by her, and it was, as far as I know, because I never met her, it was kind of the gathering of the designers of the office, the architectural designers, for competitions, mainly. So they were spread around like different clusters, and then she gathered them in one cluster and said, this is the cluster that performs the biggest design pieces and competitions of the office back then. So it created like a culture of Maya designers, which is a software, and people pushing the design. Not all projects at Zaha or any office are like hyper design, showstoppers. Obviously, there are I call them the bread and butter projects. Like, and you never see them. I don't see them, but they are obviously making money for the office. I mean, it's everywhere. They're just not public and in the media. But the ones that are going to the media and are competing with some of the big ones, big other offices, they usually pass through Zaha cluster. So I was part of the Zaha cluster for those 6 years. Yeah, started as an assistant and then left as senior. But I think Zaha, and even when you are working at Zaha, you are pretty free to research design and to one day propose boxes, the other day propose like a bubblegum project. There's no loyalty to a language, as it should, right? Maybe there is one thing on Zaha that is linear, and that is pushing for design, pushing for the next step of design. And that's probably your biggest concern as a designer at Zaha. Honest concern is to think, what's the next step? What is not being done and what has not been done? Probably that's the only linear practice at Zaha. It is to look for what has not been done yet. And that means cubes, that means triangles, that means circles, that means fluidity, that means anything. So the comment that people make, and they actually made that on some projects that I've worked on, this is not Zaha. I mean, fuck off. It's not Zaha. It was done at Zaha. What do you mean? What do you know about what's Zaha, what's not Zaha? You know, it's a very annoying comment. So it's an office that is completely free to just research into design. Is it exclusively related to the tool? No. I've seen people with the right talent for a Zaha office or a less conventional office, but without the knowledge of the tool, but they are the right people. And you could tell immediately. When you actually get the eye to find these people, you spot them, even if they don't have the tools. Does the office rely a lot on the tools and its success also relies on the tools? Yeah, 100%. I mean, you learn the tools here. This is one of their biggest sources of employment. It's from DRL, because they do teach you the tools. And if these tools were being taught in other schools, they would probably be like super good candidates for employment. But these other schools don't want to teach these tools, or they don't have anyone to teach us the tools. So they probably look for the places where the tool is being disseminated. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to become a teacher of the most important tool at Zaha for design. There are obviously a lot of very important tools. There's one fundamental tool at Zaha for design, which is Maya from Autodesk. And there are just a few places that teaches Maya. And 8 years ago, this was probably the only place I knew that was teaching Maya here at the DRL. So because I saw the tool as one of the biggest sources of Zaha DNA, I decided that I wanted to teach it to disseminate the tool, not just in the RL niche, but everywhere around. And that's why I've been teaching tools for the past 8 years. Tools to create, because it's horrible when you do have the talent, when you have the vision, when you believe in the theory, but you don't have the tool. And how can a tool be what is stopping you from joining these places, right? So I started by teaching the tool, right? Because I did think that the tool was not known enough, and it was not allowing people to actually express what they see in architecture, especially when it comes to fluid design, which is what Zaha is. So I started with the tool, which was Maya, and then I started doing mainly tutorials, and they're still around. Like a lot of people go through these online tutorials, which is from my Autodesk mainly. And then in the past years, I felt it was also relevant to start teaching like a train of thought and a way to approach architecture, but very shy, like very much in a studio, short studio, 30 people only, like from time to time, like semesters. And it's not just tools anymore, but it's a way to approach architecture. So I started opening my own design research studio, and it was not just tools anymore. It was more, how do you practice for a different world? In this case, what I'm doing now, which is metaverse, open worlds, real-time open worlds. And that's literally how I moved from teaching tools to teaching studio. One part that I was missing now was how I left Zaha. I was hired, I was contacted by a Web3 company, a very big one from USA, and they were developing metaverses, one metaverse. They are Web3, so they do everything. They do NFTs, so on and so forth. But they were designing a mega city called Miami, inspired in Miami, for a metaverse, so open world, real time. And they decided to contact me for the position of architect director of this metaverse city. And I was in total disbelief of the metaverse, like we all are, super skeptical. I was like just looking at it from the sidelines, you know, like let's see what happens, like we all, like most of us are. So I never really thought that I was going to go to the trenches, and I was called to lead the trenches in that case. And I'm not sure. I thought about it for a long time. I saw what was being done for digital reality, and it was not enough, and it was not good enough, and architects were not getting involved enough, most importantly, and architects do need to get involved. It's not just because capital is there, and the opportunity is there, but there's also responsibility to be there. And I felt, yeah, if I'm gonna leave Zaha for something big, it needs to be radically different, not a second office of a conventional architecture project. So I went, left, and started 1 year working for a metaverse company. It's really different on many aspects. I put up my own team of architects, only architects, really believe in the architectural community, designing real-time open worlds. And then after year, I started getting work, like projects outside. I mean, there's a huge buzz around metaverse, so I was getting a lot of people reaching out like, hey, can you help me on this? Or like, can you do this project? And like commissions. And then I felt, you know, like I'm not getting any younger. I'm already 34. Let's start this shit. Like, let's do it. And then that's when I decided, first of all, I had to analyze the market. Is the job as an architect for metaverse resourceful enough for you to live off from it? No. So it was obvious that it would have to be an hybrid practice, which I am 100% convinced that is going to be the future of our profession, an hybrid practice for a digital environment and a physical environment. What architects don't know is the digital environment actually should pay you off more than the physical environment. So if any architecture practice is thinking about or is getting a proposal for a digital environment right now, charge more. Charge a lot more. Charge the double. And also, I always give this advice for offices. If your client asks for the 3D model, write another contract. Like, they will put the 3D model on a metaverse. For real. And it does should be charged. So I studied an hybrid practice, which is what I'm doing now. I'm getting projects outside for master plan, like in physical grounds, and I am 100% developing my own product for a metaverse. Solo mine, not the project, the whole product. One time I did a conference in India, and then by the end of it, that was like an engineer came up to me and he was like, yeah, this metaverse is cool, but don't you miss the physical world? And I was like very political, like, no. Between you and me right now, no, I don't. I decided to go like full on body and mind into digital, which is, I know everyone hates this answer. Everyone wants like, no, be grounded. No, but like physical connections are so important. Yes, they are. I don't mind giving this part of my life to a fully digital dimension of what our reality is going to be, because I do believe that it's going to be part of our life. 50% of our life will be digital. So we might as well just get into it and get it over with, you know? So I know I can also predict a Mariana that will grow older to become more attached to the physical ground and probably go back to the most physical activities that I can, and back to my childhood, which is painting, which is like putting my hands on the ground and actually building physical structures. But right now I'm gonna allow the 30-year-old one to be completely digital. There's like the very obvious way to operate on the metaverse, which is the literal way of what is a door, what is a doorknob, and to go so literal to the window and to the window frame and the mullions and so on. There's that interpretation and an intervention on the metaverse, and then there's the other one, which is absolutely abstract, and this is what people think will be a digital reality, which is like what's the limit of conceptual and abstraction of space, and people think like, why are you not doing super abstract stuff? And then there's the middle ground, which I always find where it is where the wisdom is, which is actually doing a little bit of both, like the magic of what is abstract and a lot of realism to these spaces. And this is exactly where I'm at. And it's a strategy actually, because part of an hybrid practice in architecture is to develop projects that are not going to be time wasters. If you develop it digitally, you're not going to waste time to make them feasible for a physical environment. I want to waste the least amount of time to make it buildable. And if it never goes to physical, it's good enough to go to digital, or it's magic enough to go to digital. So the sweet middle point is where I think a smart architect should stay. Not too realistic, so it's not boring, it's not conventional, it's not, like the same shit we see every day, everywhere, and also not too abstract, because we are also still designing for conventional people. Like, I know metaverse isn't conventional, but we are very conventional. Like, I still want to recognize a window, or like the typical vocabulary, the archetypes. We know archetypes. We know how to navigate in archetypes. So if I remove the archetypes from the space, you'll be completely lost, right? There's no sense of navigation. So there's still this middle point. And this is where I lay. The hardest thing to learn, there are a couple of hard things. I don't know how personal this could go. There's one very hard thing that is not relatable for everyone, and there's another one that is slightly more relatable. So the one that is slightly more relatable is that was the hardest thing to learn, was what you're learning now is probably not enough, which sounds horrible, but what I've learned and what I was learning when I was back in my country or in another context, first of all, is not all the knowledge that exists. This is something that you should know, and it's also not enough. Okay, that's probably one of the hardest, and one of my biggest heartbreaks when I got here was I don't know enough. I'm not even close to know enough. That was one of the toughest ones. Then the other one that's kind of less relatable, and it's also one of the hardest lessons I'm learning now. Your gender does play a very big role on your success and and success. Really big role on everything. And that is a hard lesson because you are powerless when it comes to that. I mean, you go around it, but you are not going to solve it. And it's not going to be solved in my lifetime or yours or this generation lifetime. So gender role is really decisive. And then what I want to learn, I want to learn a bit more patience. And I want to learn contempt. Yeah, to know that what I know is not enough, but it is okay. Yeah, I think that's probably what I want to learn the most. It's very hard for us to like come to peace with the stage that we are at, with the age that we have. It does not matter. Like literally it does not matter. Like regardless of your age, the stage that you are at is the right stage, period. And if it's not, we don't care. It is the right stage because you say so.